Do you want to hear a dirty joke? Mud flood. What do you call a frog stuck in the mud? Unhoppy. My coffee tastes like mud. It was ground last week. Don't blame me, blame my mudder. Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. Someone in my family told me I'm too serious in my videos, so I thought I'd start with a few jokes. But now, laughing time is over. I've taken on the challenge of creating a comprehensive video on mud flood, so I'll start with a few definitions. Comprehensive, complete, including all or nearly all elements or aspects of something. I noticed a problem. I called my channel Mud Flood, but I haven't made many videos on the subject, so here goes. What is mud flood? Mud flood, an obscure event or events which happened in the past, leaving a uniformly distributed layer of soil or dirt over all habitable land. When and how it happened remains a mystery, but it is generally supposed to have happened around the 1840s and 1850s. Official history has neglected mention of a mud flood event, and yet widespread evidence of mud flood is apparent in virtually every major city on Earth. At least, major cities with old sections 150 years or greater. What is the evidence that a mud flood occurred? Well, one of the biggest features and evidence is submerged ground floor windows, or submerged foundations of buildings in ways that an architect would not have intended. And I'll explain more as I continue. Okay, just one last thing I want to mention in my definition before I get into it is that there may have been more than one mud flood event in the past. There might have been a series of them over the course of hundreds of years. But that remains to be proven. Okay, so I thought I'd start things off by taking a look around the world and pointing out signs of what I think are evidence of mud flood events. So I've just saved a bunch of Google Maps images on my computer, and I'm just going to go through those. Okay, I guess I'm going in alphabetical order. This is in Bangladesh, and this is in Dhaka, which is the major city. I think it's the capital. And here we are in a back alley. This is a very typical image of what it looks like there, and you have windows that are sort of close to the ground. And if you're going to design a building, I don't know why you would put windows way down here. I think you'd probably put them closer to, head height or even a little bit higher, right? And you can even see that they've bricked it up. And there's a stucco layer here. Now, Bangladesh, just having looked around on Google Maps, it looks like there's an active effort in this city to reclaim bricks. So you see a lot of people just on the street with reclaimed bricks, and they've crushed them up, and people seem to be selling them, and there's a lot of kind of contracting that goes on where people are actually doing brickwork. So even though to me this looks like an old building that's been bricked up a long time ago, it actually might not be that old. So I'm just trying to be fair in saying that this looks to me like an old building, but it may not be. Okay, next image. Okay, Bangladesh as well. Again, you've got these low-lying windows, and it's probably brick underneath, and they kind of put a concrete stucco layer with sand and cement on top. Okay, same place. And here you have street level, and you only have a one-story house, but this one-story house is generally below street level. And I picked this image because this happens quite a lot in Dhaka, in the city. You see a lot of this, where these back alleys are kind of dug out. And here's that crushed brick that I was mentioning. There's a lot of that going on in the city. Okay, so for the next country, I'm going to be talking about Bhutan. Bhutan is here. It's sandwiched between China and South Asia. So you've got Nepal to the west and Bangladesh to the south. Anyway, this is in Bhutan, and you can see you've got an old building here, and the street level is up high here, and they've converted the second story into an entranceway. Is this evidence of mud flood? I'm not sure. Same type of thing. Here again is Bhutan. You've got the roadway, which is a little bit higher, and the grade kind of goes down this way. But I also noticed that there's like a small doorway that seems to be in a little bit of an odd spot. Goes down perhaps into a lower level. This is in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and you've got a building which looks like it's been affected by kind of like a landslide of mud going down the street that way. And to me it just doesn't look like you would build a building and leave the rear portion of it submerged by mud. If you're going to the effort to dig the foundation and put in windows, I don't think you'd want to go to the trouble of burying the backside of it up again with dirt and fill. So to me this looks like evidence of mud flood. This is in Israel. This is across on the same street. These, well, I guess this is in Haifa. These corner units are really good. The street really... So to me what looks like may have happened is historically, you know, these buildings existed and then some mud flood event happened and inundated the entire street, and this area here has since been dug out and the street remains because it's the roadway, but to me this looks dug out. Again, this is in Israel. You've got a basement window or a first story window which is submerged and it's been modified, but there's still a remnant that there used to be a window here. Now if you did have a window and you were going to design a building from the ground up, why would you put a window down here only to cover it up with dirt? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. To be fair, I mean, I suppose you could build homes into mountainsides. This is possible, but once again, why would you design your building in such a way that ground floor or basement floor windows would end up being half submerged? I think if you were going to go to the effort to construct a window frame and put a window inside of it, you wouldn't want it being reburied with mud and dirt, right? So I think a mud flood event has happened and then somebody has gone to the trouble of, you know, creating a staircase and digging things out. So to me, again, mud flood evidence. Unfortunately, I closed my browser when I was looking at this, so I didn't find the exact address. But this is in Tokyo. This is not mud flood. If I had to speculate, I think places like Japan and even Korea do a pretty good job of actually burying any remnant ground floor windows. I suspect that there are a lot of mud flood buildings in these areas, but for whatever reason they seem to have done a good job of putting cladding on the base of the exterior of the building. But this struck my attention when I saw it. This is a whole different topic as far as to architecture, and why there's almost like Western colonial styles of architecture and columns. Like this is a Corinthian column, I think, composite column, I'm not sure, but you know, this is appearing in Japan, and maybe this is done stylistically, but I question whether or not this was like original. Okay, so this is in Kyrgyzstan, and if you know your geography, you'll know this is south of Russia, mainland Russia, and kind of near Kazakhstan. And there's a lot of these, what people might assume are Soviet-style apartment buildings, and I think that actually that's almost a misnomer. I think that these buildings are much older than anything Soviet. I think they're at least built on old foundations of previous buildings. So just a question, like, why would you construct this in such a way to leave like 2 feet of empty space underneath, I don't know what you call this, like, it just doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you return this to the ground, or I don't know. And again, you've got, you know, sort of like dugouts that go into basement businesses, and the first story isn't really first story, it's like 1.5 stories, so they end up having to construct these staircases that go from the 1.5 story down to ground level. So again, just evidence that a mud flood event has probably occurred, because you wouldn't design things like this, I don't think. I just zoomed in on the shot, and you can even see that under this 2-foot space you do have a basement window which has been half submerged, and it's been crudely covered up. My point is, I just don't think you would design the front entrance of your building like this. I think there's better, more efficient ways to do it, further indicating that a mud flood event has happened in this area. This is in Mongolia, and there were lots of examples here in Ulaanbaatar, which I think is the capital, of half-submerged windows. Now, you wouldn't design a building like this. To me, this only happens after the building has been submerged. This is the same building, and you have this entranceway that kind of goes down a half a floor. Again, it doesn't. Who am I to judge, but this just doesn't look like the best way to design an entranceway into a building, or even an entranceway into a basement. This is Ulaanbaatar again, and you've got examples of submerged basement windows. You've got a window that was covered up here. And generally in this area, every building has a stucco exterior on it, leading me to believe that these are very old buildings and they've been refinished. This is also in Ulaanbaatar. But let's just suppose you were going to build this building as a brand new building, dig the foundation and then build the framing and everything else. Then once you built the building, why would you go to the trouble of burying the foundation of it? I mean, what would be the point of doing that? I just don't think that this is a typical building practice anywhere in the world. I mean, this isn't even like a convenient way of parking your car. So what practical purpose would this serve to build your parking lot up into the side of the building? Well, I don't think there is a practical purpose. I think that this is covering something. I think this is probably covering a foundational layer of the building. There's probably another half a story below here. And rather than make it look nice, it was just much easier to cover it up perhaps with dirt, concrete, and then just concrete stucco over top of it. And also you have like this entranceway that had to be made up to the second story, or story and a half. Same building, across the street you've got these half submerged windows. I mean, yes, you can put basement windows in. Even brand new build homes have basement windows. Could this be an access panel? Maybe. But once again, virtually every building, maybe not this one here, but everything's re-stuccoed. The exterior is refinished. This is still Ulaanbaatar, and you know, what's the point of having a window covered up like that, or an entrance way down like that? It just doesn't look like you designed it this way. Here's an instance where you have probably areas on the building where windows used to be, and because the building was later stucco refinished at some time, they probably just left the original window boxes and just covered up the windows. Hopefully I'm explaining it well, but once again I think this is evidence of mud flood. So a mud flood event happened, it submerged this building, and they covered the exterior, and these windows were inconvenient. This is on the far eastern, southeast part of Russia. This is in Vladivostok, and to me it's the epitome of mud flood buildings. If you want to see some extreme examples of mud flood, Vladivostok has it all. And partly it's due because it's a very hilly area, so there's a lot of high and low elevation, and so then you end up it ends up being very difficult to deal with the mud flood event which happened historically, and you end up with funny things like this. You would never design a building to have a half-submerged window entranceway like this, whatever this was. It'd be very difficult for the tradespeople to work on this. I mean, why go to the effort of putting in basement windows when they get smaller and smaller and more narrow, only to have dirt thrown in front of them? I think if you're going to go to the effort to put a window into your foundation, you know, you'd want to make sure it's visible, but it's submerged. Without making an articulate argument as to how this is an example of mud flood, I'll put it like this. I take one look at this building, and I look at it as a whole, and I say something's not right here. It looks like it's either sinking into the ground or it was buried. Now, why would you bury a building? I don't think there's a logical explanation for why you would do that. And even, you can see that this street even goes down this way, so what's the point of submerging a street or buildings? What's the practical purpose? I can only conclude that a mud flood must have happened sometime in the past. I mean, just looking at the style of these windows, and even the width of the window, it's about as wide as this doorway. I guess we'd have to take a tape measure and check it, but what I'm getting at is, to me, it looks like this door here is simply one of these windows, one of these old windows converted into a doorway. This doesn't look like the entrance to this building. Okay, maybe a fire exit, but if you're going to put an entrance on the building, I think it would probably be at the corner, or at least in the center. But this door is off to the side. Oh, maybe this is one whole building. Here's a really good example. You know, you've got half submerged windows. Would some architect have designed the building that way? And why go to the trouble of throwing dirt back onto the foundation of the windows to cover up the windows you spent effort in creating for the building? And this door just looks way too small. You'd have to probably duck your head to get inside this building, and also it looks like maybe a window converted into a door as well. Maybe I'll reserve making too many comments, otherwise I might end up repeating myself and irritate the listener. So I'll just show some of these pictures. Okay, I can't resist. Okay, so this just looks like a window. Looks like one of these windows. This isn't even being used as a door anymore, but this looks like a window and this looks like a window. And then you even have like this foundational story peering out here, and I would bet that this is probably covering up a foundational window as well. By my eye, it looks like this was originally a 4-story building, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And how strange is it that a 4-story building, at the rear of it, it ends up becoming like a 2-story building. You wouldn't design a building like that, in my opinion. And I guess to get access to these lower foundational layers, they had to dig their way through. Unfortunately, I didn't get a great shot going in straight on this way, just to show the depth of how many stories goes down here. I think it's like 6 stories that are completely visible on this side of this building, and like 3.5 on this side. I mean, surely you wouldn't go to the trouble of designing it like this, where you have detail being submerged into the ground. I mean, why go to the effort of creating detailed concrete work simply to have it submerged and not visible? This again to me looks like a converted window into an entrance, and one of these windows was converted into a doorway. This is Cape Town in South Africa, and it had some pretty good examples. I don't know if somebody's living in this and this is a front entrance, but that would be a challenge to get out of your house every day. Okay, this is all in the same neighborhood, Cape Town, South Africa. And you can see that there used to be at least 1, maybe 2 buildings that used to be here. And you can even see that some of the concrete stonework is left. Okay, so I guess the point I would like to make is, so suppose you dig down to create a foundational level to pour a concrete pad for your home. Why would you then go to the trouble of shoveling dirt to one side of it? I mean, at least if you're going to dig down to the foundation to build on it, why would you want to pile up dirt next to it? It doesn't make any sense. You would at least leave it sort of dug out so you could maybe walk around your home. Well, we can't see the original home, so maybe I shouldn't speculate too much. What this looks like to me is that the exterior of this building was probably re-bricked at some point. That's just what it looks like. I mean, if you're going to build windows all the way across, why design it in such a way that it would get gradually smaller and smaller? I suppose it could be a design style, but I really don't think so. This one is in Korea, and even though I see buildings that look like remnants from a mud flood, it looks like Korea really does a good job of covering the exterior at the base of the building with cladding or stucco. Take for example this home here. Say this was just being built anew. Okay, so you would dig down to maybe a bedrock flat foundational level. So then why would you go to the trouble of... Well, wouldn't you dig this section out as well? I mean, you'd dig all of it out. And at least when this was built, you wouldn't shovel dirt back onto the side of the house. So, I don't know, it just doesn't look like you would design a building like this. To me, it looks like there was another building here at some point in this empty lot. And maybe like a building here before, at a time back closer to the mud flood even, because it is sloped down. Not sure how that happened. So folks, I don't know if it's appreciated that I go through and try to explain all these photos, or whether it would have been better to just show the images without talking. But at least you know what I'm thinking. Okay, so this is in Igdir, Turkey. So, probably saying it wrong, but Igdir, Turkey is on the very easternmost side of Turkey, up close to Armenia. There is something I noticed. If you go to Igdir, Turkey today, it looks like there's an awful lot of renovation going on. There's like renovation crews everywhere, and you could actually see this on the Google Map view with the little orange man. And well, why am I mentioning this? Well, if you actually get more towards the outskirts of the town, it looks a little bit more like this. Right? So it looks like there's almost existing stone block foundational buildings on the outskirts of town that really haven't been dealt with yet. And that's contrasted with the inner city, where it looks like there's a lot of renovation going on. So this is the outskirts of the town, generally looks like this, whereas the inner section of the town looks a little bit more like this. Once again, the outskirts looks like this, the outer limit of the town looks like this, and the inner part of town looks more like this. Okay, so this is a little bit more towards the outskirts of the town. I'll have to show you that I actually did that. Okay, so here's Igdir, right? So if we take the Google man, the orange guy, and we stick him kind of on the outside of the center of town, just show you what it looks like. It looks like this, where things are still I'll find some better examples, but it looks like things haven't completely expanded out to this area. You still have a lot of these like ruinous kind of walls being built around. Okay folks, so just bear with me because I'm trying to prove my point, but once again, take the orange man, go kind of towards the outskirts. Here's the center of town, I'm going to the outskirts. And things look a little bit more like this, like there's like ruins that haven't really been dealt with yet. I mean, it's subdivided into lots, but there's a lot of this thing going on. And here's a good example. They have like these pre-existing foundational walls, and it looks like they just build right on top of them and they're putting new blocks on top. Okay, so I'll grab the little man. So here's Igdir, and we'll go, I don't know, somewhere closer to the center of town. And there's just, this may not have been the best spot to choose, but there's construction going on everywhere. Just everywhere. Well, there's some construction going on back there. They're still putting windows in the building. Like, to me this looks like a booming town, and they're taking like old ruins, and like this place in Turkey is currently getting built up. here seems to be a pretty good example of what this Igdir town looks like. Just lots of construction going on, lots of scaffolding, lots of stucco crews. Right, here's another building being built over here, and I don't know, I was trying to look at it closely and determine whether or not they're building on existing ruins. Seems like a bit of a dangerous way to build a building, but maybe, you know, did they dig this out and they're going to build here? Not really sure, but then you still do see a lot of ruinous old buildings in the center of town, so something really is happening in this particular area of Turkey. And once again, the outskirts are a contrast to what's going on in the inner city. It almost looks like they're developing the country and they're getting rid of all these old ruins by building on top of them, and they're expanding outwards from the center. That's a lot of words to explain the point I was trying to make. Let's go back to my pictures. Okay, I'll try to get through these quickly. Once again, this is a very dangerous way to, you know, put a foundational window box, whatever you want to call this. Someone could just walk in there and get hurt. At least if you're going to design it this way, it might be good to put up guardrails. Again, submerged foundational level windows. This is Igdir. And then you've got these dugouts. Reminds me a little bit of Rebel Without a Pause in his Glasgow videos. You know, why would you build that way? Why would you put a doorway up here? I think, to me, somebody probably tried to create a second story entrance by, you know, maybe bringing steps here, and then they just tore it away at some point. There's lots of this in Igdir. Half submerged basement windows, you can see it here too. The door height is way too low. Again, the windows. More ruins, looks like they're salvaging. Again, you've got submerged windows, but it looks like they salvage an awful lot of it. I think this might be a mosque here, I'm not sure. But you've got a lot of submerged windows and doors. This is just across the street. This is the opposite side of the street over here. Yeah, why would you build it that way? Once again, this is the outskirts of town. So this is the outer area of Igdir. And if you ask me, what do I know? But give this a few years. You know, it's 2018 now, August 10, 2018. You're watching this in a few years. Come back to 299 SK and check out whether this area gets built up. I bet you it does. And this, to me, will look like this in a few years. They're expanding outwards. Once again, more outskirts of town. This is a nice idea, but to me it would take a lot of work to build a concrete brick wall simply to house in livestock. So I don't know if this is from a pre-existent building. Just speculation. This is a neighborhood style all over the world. Like if you go to Ukraine or Poland or Chile or Argentina, people tend to fence in their property. So this is a common way people build. Here's a scene in Ukraine where people tend to fence off their property with these waist-high walls or higher, and it's a typical building style, and people seem to build with inside them. I mean, I don't know, was this mud flood? Okay, so the phone rang and can't even remember where I was. Okay, all I wanted to say is that this is the typical building style. So you have like an outer wall, and somebody's kind of sectioning off their home. Is this a mud flood wall? Probably not. I don't think it is. It looks a lot newer than that. It's not old. But people do kind of build their homes this way, and this is not typical of just Ukraine. This is like kind of all of Eastern Europe, and even parts of South America, and even other parts of the world. Not where I live, though. People don't build this style. My point is that back to Igdir, Turkey, and people seem to section off their areas of land where maybe they were already sectioned off, and it just seems to be the building style. Are people just recolonizing old mud flood devastated areas? Well, I'm not going that far with my argument, but it is my thinking. Okay, back to the beginning. Hopefully I can prove my point again here, that there's like this outward expansion from major urban city centers, like in Igdir, Turkey. You see the same type of thing happening in other cities like Ulaanbaatar. In Mongolia, I saw a similar type of thing happening in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where they're kind of parceling out land on the outskirts. There's a lot of reclaiming of bricks and this type of thing. I don't know how well I can put it into words, but anyway. Okay, so here's Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, and this is the major city, and like you can see that people are sort of expanding that way. And just to show what I'm talking about, take the little man, put him on the map anywhere. It's pretty developed. There's a lot of new development going on. But here's Ulaanbaatar, but closer to the north of the city, you've got all these sand dune mounds. And if you zoom in on these areas, these are almost more like frontier land, where people are just only now like colonizing. Right, so there's all these slopey dirt roads and not a lot of trees, and people are building new homes. Okay, so once again, like Ulaanbaatar is down here, it kind of is expanding up this way, and I'm going to zoom in to what you might call like the hinterlands, the outskirts. And just put it at the end of the road. And this is kind of what people are living in. Like there's no trees, just these blank mountains, dirt roads. Yurts, people are still living in yurts. But this looks like the extent of the frontier to me. Okay, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked from my main video, but I came across it and I wanted to sneak it in. If you're interested in looking up some images yourself, type in Shusha, Armenia, and you get a lot of neat old pictures. I don't even know the history, but apparently in 1920 there was like a pogrom or a massacre of some type, but it's getting smaller and smaller. The old pictures are neat, just a devastated city. Even today, the place looks like this. Okay, so I'm going to summarize a few popular channels on mud flood. And of course the absolute first one that I have to mention is Philip Druzhinin's channel, and all the videos he talks about. He deals with a lot of subjects, not just mud flood, and these are some of the most popular ones here. And for the longest time, maybe about a year or so, he was like one of the only people talking about the mud flood. So I can't sum up everything he discusses, but I just want to mention one of the first videos he made on the topic of mud flood, and that's this one. He's since made many videos on it, and much better ones, but I'm just going to cover this one really quickly because it kind of lays the groundwork. It came out in November of 2016, and so far as I know, it was one of the first videos to explain and articulate a concept of mud flood. Okay, so in this video he starts explaining an event in Moscow that happened in 1870 in an area called Tsaritsino, and one of the big striking themes is that, like, there's trees and bushes and it's overgrown here, so anybody looking at this would probably say to themselves, how does a major city like Moscow become abandoned and overgrown with trees? So, using a series of pictures, he's going through the process of explaining this strange phenomenon of how something like this can even happen in a big city. Just very quickly, he shows an image in Odessa, which is in the south of Russia, and without explaining all of it, this basically shows the depth and level of the mud flood historically. So this has actually been excavated, probably by heavy construction equipment, and now you can see just how deep it goes. I'm just going to show one image, but he's looking at historical artwork, particularly here where you see like lightning coming from the sky and brimstone and debris and mud falling from the sky. So here we have an event which actually shows that something may have actually happened on Earth which would have caused a mud flood. He's just speculating, but he's kind of taking us through a story. He shows an example in Norway, where Vikings supposedly had settlements, and he's saying like, hey, was this originally a Viking burial, and how does a boat get this buried under such a deep layer of soil? I think I know what he's talking about. When I was in school, I remember hearing stories about how Vikings would bury their dead in ships, in their boats. So I heard this in school as well, and I think there's probably a lot of popular children's stories which have this concept in it where they say Vikings buried their dead in boats. So it's just my opinion, but I think that's what he's getting at in this image here, saying, is that officially how it happened? Was this actually a Viking burial or something else? Like, how exactly was this ship buried? And then later in his video, he gives kind of like a modern day example where mud can inundate vast areas of land, and he uses this one example from the Philippines, which I guess was part of a mining operation. Here's a better image here which shows heavy equipment, and I guess somehow something was struck underneath the ground, maybe through drilling, some type of augering going through the ground, and then all of a sudden soil and mud starts pouring up through the ground. Ultimately, this lays waste to a large area of land and pretty much destroys a lot of existing housing in the area, so people can't live here anymore. But I'm glad he chose this because I think it is a pretty good example of, historically how a mud flood could have affected the landscape, much similar as to how you can see it happens even today. Philip goes on to show some examples in Crimea where there's actually mud volcanoes that are documented. But I think the great point he's making is that, such an event happening is a realistic, well-documented phenomenon. He goes on to show and demonstrate that in Napoli, in Italy, there's these catacombs underneath the ground. And I think the real point he's making here is that, look, people didn't just, dig into the ground and develop and build underground cities. Like, how does that even happen? These cities must have been buried at some point. I think that's what this implicates, particularly in this image. Like, how do you get this vast open space? How do you engineer something underground like this? Well, maybe this wasn't engineered underground. Maybe this used to be closer to the surface, and now it's just been buried. And here he's showing that even in these catacombs, they're very well developed. Like, is this a drain pipe, perhaps? Is this plumbing? Is this a way to get rid of wastewater, maybe? And look, there's steps. I think it's very easy to see how this place would have originally been used for, regular and frequent human habitation. So how's this underground? He goes on to show some of the ruins in Rome, showing how much of what we know as Rome today has actually been excavated and unearthed. In all, I think what he's done here is he's shown different aspects of history and reconstructed it into a short 20-minute narrative, and shown pretty well how a mud flood conceivably could have happened in the past. I'd like to emphasize again that this was one of his first videos that he had put out, and he's since put out a lot of great videos, even better than this one. In the least, I hope I haven't misinterpreted his words or his video or his point or any of the things he was trying to say, so please, the best thing you can do is just go back and watch the original video. I'll leave the link in the description below. I'd also like to point out that he has almost 6,500 subscribers. His most popular video has about 58,000 views, and in comparison, my channel is very small and insignificant compared to that. So who am I to be summarizing his work? But anyway, I like his work so much, that's why I did it. Okay, the next channel I want to talk about is Martin Liedtke's channel. But for the viewer's sake, I will mention Rebel Without a Pause's videos first, because, well, he goes out with his camera, investigating firsthand on the ground as to what's going on out there, and there's a bit of a story to tell in the videos that he's created. Rebel Without a Pause, I mean. So this is a man that is looking both in the sky with his telescope, and he's also looking on the ground at the mud as well. Rebel Without a Pause has many interesting things to say, but I'm going to focus on the things he says about mud flood, and I've selected 3 of my most favorite of his videos. Judging by the footage that Rebel Without a Pause has captured, it appears that Glasgow, Scotland has some of the most extreme examples of mudflood. I was shocked when I first started watching some of his videos. It seems almost every building has these examples of dugout areas surrounding them where like 10 to 15 feet of mud have been dug out from around the exterior of the building, and then you see these sort of vaulted staircases and modified windows as entrances. Anyway, what really impressed me is that Rebel Without a Pause covered a building in specific, which is called Royal Exchange Square. Not only that, but he went to the trouble of going out and doing some footwork and did some investigative reporting as to the original building plan for the Royal Exchange Square building. I think we really have to be thankful to somebody who does this. I mean, after all, most of us are just sitting at our computers passively watching, myself included, and here's somebody who goes out and actually decides to investigate things on his own. So this is like the 1% of the 1% of people who follow Mudflood who are bold enough to go out and start asking questions. So this makes Rebel Without a Pause a truly extraordinary person. Now, I'm not out to stroke people's egos, but I did appreciate that. Here's another video he made where he's kind of taken Mudflood a step further. He's saying, hey, where are all the old grave markers? Given today's population, well, we should have a certain number of descendants, and therefore we should have a certain amount of people in the graveyard to show for it. Those are my words, not his, but I think that's generally what he's going after. And so he takes a trip to one of Glasgow's oldest cemeteries, which I think is actually one of the country's oldest cemeteries, and he starts looking at some dates on the gravestones. That was a really remarkable video. And he also pays a visit to a local cathedral, something which is sort of related to Mudflood. Certainly if we're going to look at all this old evidence of Mudflood, then we might want to start questioning everything else, like the architecture that came before such an event happened, like these magnificent old cathedrals which seem to show up all over the earth. There is certainly more to this video that will have to remain unexplained. You just have to go watch the video. Well, my last point with this is that he's out there doing some investigative work, and he's shared it with everybody, and I think we all benefit for it. Okay, so if you follow Mudflood, then this next channel needs no introduction at all. This is Martin Liedtke's channel, also known as Flat Earth British. I subscribe to this channel. I watch every video he puts out, and I don't know how to begin summarizing his channel. It's fantastic. The reason I am covering it now is because he talks a lot about Mudflood, among many other things. One reason I like Martin's channel is that he's very interactive with his subscribers and his viewers, and he reads their comments and responds to them, and I think he takes a lot of the feedback he gets and I think he incorporates it into a lot of the videos he makes. And if I have to summarize the kind of things that he's talking about, he's saying basically, yes, the Earth is flat, yes, a Mudflood event has happened, and so let's investigate history further. So he's investigating everything else that goes along with that, from old architecture to one of the big things I think people have tuned in to his channel for is his looking at old maps. The lead atlas. Okay, I cut it off a little bit here, but here's a screenshot. Just some of the things he's looking at is almost like a land before the one we know today, and the truth is strange, and it's not really something I think we understand, and so he's bringing a lot of that to light. a lot of the things that I've understood about mud flood have come to light to me through Martin's channel. So there's this mysterious circumstance where if we look at old images, old pictures of major cities around the world from like the 1860s to 1880s, thereabouts, that, well, here's St. Petersburg, and big amazing cities with impressive architecture, and there is something that's missing in them. It's people. There's not a lot of people in these old images. Well, I really liked this video where Martin starts examining the true nature of cathedrals, and particularly these somatic patterns which appear on the stained glass windows at the front of them. This is a video I really got excited about. This is an old clock found in Venice, and it appears that at some time between when this photo was taken and today, that this clock has been modified and replaced with a more colorful one. But I think the point that Martin ends up making is that, like, look, this clock has, you know, the numerals we understand it as compared to this colorful clock they replaced it with, which has Roman numerals, right? So now they've replaced it with a clock that supposedly looks more Roman, which might look older than the one in the image. And the strange thing is that in this old image, this clock, this mechanism, appears to be spinning when the photo was taken. Okay, so one of my more recent favorite videos is one where Martin starts talking about all of the different comets that have hit the Earth in the past. Now, why are comets of interest? Why are they important? Well, if we are looking to events that might explain the cause of the mud flood, then it appears that maybe comets are part of the narrative. Now, to try to explain why that's the case really would require an entirely new video to explain it. Okay, another great channel that I always tune in and like to watch is Fendap's channel, or Alan's channel, and he tends to tie things in, or makes attempts to tie things in with the Bible and, well, God's Word, right? And he talks about a lot of things, too many things to really sum up in a sentence, but, you know, he's talking about you know, the ancient subway system. This was a good video here, the New York subway system. A couple of years ago he started talking about the Erie Canal. That's very mud flood related, right? Basically saying, how did all these Irish immigrants come over and dig out this you know, many kilometer long canal that connects Lake Ontario to Lake Erie? You know, how is that humanly possible? It must have been done some other way. I'm not really telling it very well. I'm not retelling it very well, but you'll just have to click on the video yourself and watch it. I'll leave that one as a link in the description below. This channel is really, really great too, Conspiracy R Us, and he's talking about mud flood a lot, and he tends to talk a little bit about some of the destruction of old cities, particularly the fire in Chicago of 1871. He made a good video on that. I'm trying to find that video. Well, it's in here somewhere. He doesn't make a lot of videos, but when he does, they are really high quality and well researched. And okay, so sorry, I'm gonna forget somebody, and no doubt I'm gonna hurt their feelings, but here's some other good ones to watch. Captain Kirk, Flat Earth British Sub, Wise Up. This channel is huge. It's probably the biggest one I've even mentioned here, 20,000 subscribers. He's talking about mud flood related stuff. He's particularly looking at ancient ruin sites and saying, hey, they're not really as old as you think. Just check out his videos. Go subscribe. You have to watch his. VM in Minnesota makes a lot of mud flood videos. Tiger Doug, really good videos as well. Jonathan's channel, I'll try to leave links for all these in the description below. Oops, better fix this.